Hello again. This being the 50th anniversary of the death of Martin Luther King, it's fitting that as I conclude this book, David Garrow, Bearing the Cross, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, with 50 years to think about it, and this terrific book, which by the way won the Pulitzer Prize for history. It's a very sobering meditation upon what made King such a great influence upon his age, but also what keeps him before the public eye. And it's also a very realistic picture. I had known King, of course, from, well, my youth. He died when I was 18 years old, and he was a hero to me and, of course, to most of our generation, the hippie generation. And we knew of his gifts, his poise in public, his dramatic oratory style, which I, of course, later learned was from his gospel roots and also from the Bible itself. We knew of the public King, but a lot of his private battles we didn't know very much about at the time. One we have learned about in subsequent years is his battle with, well, let's just say moral lapses, which are documented in here, not graphically, but truthfully, but not concentrated upon, because in the end he had other battles to wage too that were, for him at least, more crippling. He was prone to depression, and really wished, when I think about it, as you go through the book, 800 pages long, you realize he seems to be wishing most of the time that he were doing something else, teaching perhaps theology or Bible somewhere, in a seminary situation where his gifts would have flourished too, but obviously the public stage was where he ended up. The book details the very emphatically and in great detail the inner battles of the civil rights movement, especially the ones that were waged among the leaders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And therefore what I got from the book was a really great insight into King's character and what made him such an ideal leader for the civil rights movement. Here's a discussion of the contrast between King and the other leaders of the movement. Although King was relentlessly and harshly self-critical, his tolerance for his aide's shortcomings and internal staff disputes was almost infinite. A succession of personality conflicts between top staffers, and then he lists the staffers, had generated almost constant turmoil for several years. Outsiders often thought those principles arrogant beyond belief and found the level of internal conflict amazing. The staff was totally impossible, one collaborator remembered. King seemed to assemble every egocentric character in America. Indeed, ego was seen by most SCLCs, as short form for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It was seen by most of them as the primary factor in their regular battling. I was almost immediately stunned by the egos, not only at the top, but all the way down, one new executive staff member recalled. You had to have ego just to stay in the movement, Williams observed. Ain't no money out there, ain't no nothing. You've got to have an ego to stay in that movement. Egos had much more to do with what happened than substantive differences over program, another staffer explained. Everybody in SCLC had those same ego troubles. Everybody wanted to be like Martin, or to be closer to him than were their colleagues. Not only did everybody want to be next to Dr. King, but they also wanted the other guys not to be. Ego needs, one Chicago aide complained, often get in the way of important decisions. How did King react to all of this? King often missed the worst of it, however. Nobody wanted to act crazy around Dr. King. You just didn't do that, one staffer recalled. I've seen them going it after each other, and when Dr. King walked in, everybody just kind of cooled it. In some staff meetings, however, King would purposely tolerate all sorts of exchanges in the hope of stimulating substantive dialogue. I've seen the staff damn near crawl across the table and slit each other's throats, and King would just sit there until it would come to an end, one aide remembered. King appreciated that some staffers, Williams in particular, were excessively combative, but some colleagues were unhappy at his reluctance to crack down on his subordinates. He hated to even speak harshly to anybody. That was just a part of his nature, Fred Shuttlesworth recalled. It really pained him to have to speak harshly or deal harshly with somebody. He figured the wider variety of opinions you get, the better chance you had of extracting the truth from that. King's appreciation of the positive values of SCLC's staff dynamics was reflected in the thoroughgoing calmness with which he responded to staff blow-ups. I never saw him get angry. I really didn't, and we worked together for years, one personal secretary remembered. He had unusual and unique patience, another aide noted. King would never get excited in a meeting. King just never would. So this book taught me a great lesson in how humility, the humility that is measured by one's willingness to listen to others, lesser men in this case, and self-control kept the efforts of the civil rights movement together, despite all of this flesh and all of this disputation. King was able to sit at one table with people, obviously, who must have antagonized him, and he must have felt at least irritation towards. He was able to sit because they had a common cause, hear them out, and lead them to consensus and to decision. So here's a classic lesson of how common cause and human character, when at its best, especially character exemplified by humility, a humility that is not often found in great men, can win out over the worst of our human tendencies. David Garrow, Bearing the Cross.